Happy Thursday, readers. Today for our reading workshop, we're going to need The Story of the Tiger Rising. Remember, I have an actual copy of the novel. You have a digital copy that's attached to this lesson. Reading notebook, green resource folder that's inside of your anchor binder, and your Tiger Rising packet. This is something we'll talk about at the end of our lesson today. In your green folder, you're going to be taking out a few of the teach pages, so make sure that you're following along. You're going to take out the first one that says character traits, and it spells the word steal going down. And then you're going to take out the one that says character traits. Once you're done, you're going to also take the one that says character traits, and it's going to be made into a flip book. When you're done, go ahead and put the rest in the pocket. Close your resource folder and make sure it's still in the anchor binder and put it back into your basket. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our notebook. So we started yesterday our new unit on our interpreting characters, and we're talking specifically about story elements. Yesterday we started with our story element of setting and how the author uses the setting to enhance what our characters are going to experience. So we were asked to use some of our senses to be able to indicate what tone and mood the author is giving to us as she is describing where the story is taking place. So today we're going to continue on reading The Tiger Rising. So we're going to go back to yesterday's page and we're going to start on the next page. So we were on page 35, so now we're on page 36. We're going to flip back to the table of contents, and remember you can pause the video at any time to be able to push play when you're done getting yourself organized and following the directions. So for today we were adding page 36, and we are continuing on writing character and physical traits. Today's date is 9-17-20. Remember to pause the video so you can get yourself caught up, and then you can push play when you're ready to join us. So we're going to go back to our page. So we talked about yesterday the story element of setting and how this element of fiction tells us when and where the story takes place. And the setting is important because it also can set a mood or a tone for how the author wants the story to proceed. And it makes us also use our senses and able to have that understandable situations with our characters, so we're able to relate to them because we feel like we're experiencing these different places with them. So we're going to go ahead and start by putting some of our information in. So the first is our character traits. So go ahead and turn it over. Go ahead and make your box and then the crisscross. Turn that over. And you're going to smooth it down. And then we're going to turn the page. We're not going to glue everything in yet because we're going to be working with some of our information. For this particular one, we're going to make sure that we glue it on the left-hand side. Crisscross. And then we're going to keep this last one not in our notebook yet. We're going to come back to that in a few moments. So we're going to turn back to our first teach page. So we are continuing on with our story elements, and now we're going to be talking about the story element of characters. And within our characters, we are learning the difference between our character traits and our physical traits within our characters within the story. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our character traits, and we use the acronym STEAL to help us understand why we can identify and why are these things going to be important for our understanding of who the characters are. So when we look at the word STEAL, the S is going to stand for what the character says and how do they say it. So we're looking for the actual dialogue from our characters. So I'm going to use a highlighter to go ahead and highlight says. The next one is going to be what the character thinks. So highlight thinks. What is revealed through the character's thoughts and feelings. So we're looking at dialogue. Now we're going to be looking at when the author gives us information about the insight into their thought process or the why they're feeling the way they are in situations. The E is the effect. So the effect on others and how do the characters feel or behave in reaction or response to the character. So this is that ripple effect. So a character's action and then what happens as a result for that. the actions itself. So what are they actually doing in the story that will tell us a little bit more about who they are, the decisions that they're making. So what does the character do and why? So that's going to be important, the do and why, the explanation or the rationale behind it. And the last acronym is the L, which is looks. What does the character look like? So these are going to be talking more about our physical traits. So for character traits, we're going to be focusing on our characters, what they say in the dialogue, what are they thinking. So sometimes the author will provide that inner thought process, the effects that they have on others, or how they're reacting in response to somebody else that's in the story. The actions, so what are they actually doing, and the rationale for the way they're behaving. And then their physical traits, how is that going to help us as well? So when you move on to this next page, this is going to give you a huge list of possible character traits. And within our character traits, we are talking about the way that we would be describing our characters. So you have them in alphabetical order, so I want you to take a gander and look at some of the ones that we have. You can think back to our previous read-alouds or picture books that we have read together to see if you can identify which of these traits would best associate to that character. So you can think about Bradley or Jeff Fishkin and see which one would describe them. So today we're going to be focusing on character traits, which are the description of who they are. We're going to go to our right side now. We're going to talk once again about defining character traits. So we're going to make a definition. So we're going to write character traits. And this is going to be when we can, or character traits can be inferred. And we talked about inferences last week when we were talking about our reading strategy. So that's the puzzle pieces that we're putting together. So our experiences and the text. So it can be inferred by analyzing a character's feelings, comma, actions, comma, thoughts, and dialogue. So this is going over the information that we had on our previous page. So the words of Steele. So we're going to even write that, Steele. So what they say, what they think, their E is effect, actions, and then the L was their looks. So we're going to be talking about that specifically for the next definition. So we're going to write physical traits. So character traits are what they think and what they do, so dialogue and their actions. And our physical traits are what we see. I'm going to box that word. What we see on the outside. So we could have an example, could be the way that we see their hair, or maybe how tall or short someone is, maybe that they're slender or plump. So it's going to be what we see. So this also can include their eyes, their shoes, their clothes, and skin. So character traits are more of what's on the inside, and physical traits are what we see on the outside. So inside and outside. And we can even write that off to the side so we can remember. So inside and outside. So today we're going to be focusing on one of our characters within one of the chapters that we had read together yesterday. So we started our book, The Tiger Rising, and we know that the tiger is someone that our main character had seen in the woods. So we talked about Rob and how he has a rash on his legs, and he's been able to see Sistine on the bus. So today we're going to be focusing on Rob, because when you do your classwork, I'm going to have you focus on Sistine. So we're going to be making a chart for ourselves for our example. So I want you to go ahead and skip a few lines. Draw a line to kind of separate horizontally, and we're going to make 3 columns. So you're going to draw 2 lines to separate it. So I'm going to write Rob's name at the top, and then I'm going to separate this into 3 columns. So I'm going to be focusing on Rob as a physical traits, his physical traits. I'm going to then talk about the character traits. So we said character traits are the inside. And then what text evidence best supports this. So we said that when we infer with the character traits, well, that's not always said specifically using those words of that he is thoughtful, or we can say that he's lucky, or whatever words we're going to use. So let's give ourselves a couple reminders. So we can say a character could be generous, kind, loving, and there's many more that we can use. So when we talk about our character of Rob, we're going to be focusing on what is being described to us on the outside. The middle one, the character traits, what can we infer? Does this tell us about who Rob is on the inside? So based on the author's words, we're going to have to come up with some conclusions. And then the text evidence that supports the physical traits or character traits. So we're going to start by rereading some sections. So when we reread these sections, I want you to go ahead and follow along to what Mrs. Ling is saying. Remember, you don't have to see the text right now. You can listen, or you can have printed out the chapters that I attached to the lesson. I'm on page 2 of my book, which is in chapter 1. It says, "That was what Rob thought about as he stood beneath the Kentucky Star sign and waited for the bus. The tiger, he did not think about the rash on his legs, the itchy red blisters that snaked their way into the shoes." So right there, I can stop and realize that they're describing a physical trait, something that we're going to be able to see on the outside. So I'm going to give myself a little mark to say this is my first notes, and I'm going to write that. So it says rash on his legs. So when I look at the text evidence, well, I can give myself a quote, or I can say exactly what the author has said. So you will be needing to look at your digital copy to find the exact words, but for right now, since this is our modeling, you can just write what Mrs. Ling is writing for this. So we're going to say, quotation marks, the rash on his legs. So this is considered to be explicit information since it's given directly in the words of the author. So the rash on his legs, comma, the itchy red blisters. And then remember, when we don't finish a sentence, we use the ... to indicate that the author wasn't finished, but we're done with our recording. So the physical trait is there's a rash on his legs, and the text evidence explicitly states the rash on his legs, the itchy red blisters. Well, if we could come up with a character trait that kind of describes who he is on the inside, this is not going to best support either of these. This is just something that we can see. It doesn't necessarily indicate any of his inner struggles or what he's going to say or thinks and things like that. So we're going to skip that part and then move on to a next. So when we are going to continue talking about the book, so if we continue reading, it continues to say, his father said that it would be less likely to itch if he didn't think about it. And he did not think about his mother. He hadn't thought about her since the morning of the funeral. The morning he couldn't stop crying, the great heavy sobs that made his chest and stomach hurt. His father, watching him standing beside him, had started to cry too. and then we're going to go ahead and stop, and we're going to pause to record some information. So for this particular one, what we just read were not more physical descriptions of what the character looks like, but instead they're talking about some character traits. So when we look at the character traits, we're going to start by giving the text evidence and then coming up with a word or two that's going to describe who Rob is based on this. So we're going to say the quotation marks, less likely to itch, and then we can do the ... That's just one part of the first sentence that I read. And then we're going to give a second piece of text evidence. He did not think about his mother. So we know as readers that Rob's mother had passed away. She was sick. So when they were at the funeral, we know that he was crying heavily, and then his dad slapped him and told him that he didn't need to cry anymore. So when we think about these two qualities, that if he's not thinking about something, he's not going to think about it because it's not going to affect him. So he's very determined that he's not going to let things hurt him or cause him any pain. So we're going to write the description of determined. You can also possibly say that, he's brave. And the reason why I picked the word brave is when you're dealing with such sadness or such a gut feeling of feeling like there's nothing that's going to get better because he had such a deep loss of losing his mother, he is being brave by trying not to let it affect him in his day-to-day life. So these are the two words that I feel best fit this text evidence. You might feel like there are other words that maybe fit a little bit better for you and your thought process, and that's okay as long as you're able to justify them. So we were able to read some more of the text that we read yesterday and either determine, was the author giving us a physical trait, so something we can see on the outside, or were they giving us words that would tell us who this character is on the inside, and then the text evidence that helped prompt our thinking. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn the page, and this is going to be your classwork. So you're going to take this flip book. So you're going to need your scissors. So just like we have in our past flip books, we're going to turn it to the side to make it a little easier to cut. Between each of the letters of the word steel, we're going to very carefully cut on the bold black line to separate the dotted. Stop before you get to the side column where it says character traits. We want to keep that part attached so we can make the flip book. So go ahead and get that cut. And then like we have done before, you're going to go ahead and flip this over. Use your glue stick and put a strip of glue stick right on that column that said character traits on the previous side, and then we're going to glue it down. Make sure that you have enough room because I'm going to have you write the next character. So we've already talked about Rob a little bit and started thinking about some insight into what he looks like on the outside and what he looks like on the inside. So words that describe his actions. So we're going to be focusing for classwork today on the character of Sistine. And I want you to be looking at the digital copy of the text that I have included in today's lesson, and you're going to be looking at chapters 1 through 5. So listen to the chapters 4 and 5 that are attached under this lesson first. That way it gives you a little bit more information. And I want you to be focusing on our character of Sistine. And as you listen to the story being read, you are going to try to come up with a piece of dialogue. So where it says, this is going to be where you give me information about something she says aloud. So words that she actually spoke. I want you to give me some insight into what the character's thinking. So something that's revealed about her thoughts or the feelings that she has in the story. And then you're going to give me that example underneath. The E, the effects on others. So we said that this one is, how does the character feel or behave in reaction or response to the character? So how is she acting in response to Rob, or the boys that were on the school bus, or the girls that were teasing her in the cafeteria room? So make sure that you're looking at the effects on others. Then we have the actions. Actions were, how does the character do, or what does the character do, and why are they doing it? So thinking about some of her own personal actions, write that underneath. And then the last one is going to be her physical traits. What does she look like? So when the author describes her the first day when she gets on the bus, what was she wearing? How would she be described? So thinking about her physical traits and writing them underneath. So a reminder about your classwork first is to glue in your flip book, listen to the chapters 4 through 5 that are attached underneath today's reading lesson. As you're listening, you can start filling in some of this information, or you can open up the digital copy of chapters 1 through 5 that are on today's lesson to find the specific text evidence that supports what Sistine says, what she's thinking, her effects on others, her own personal actions, and what does she look like physically, so something on the outside. When you're done with that, you're going to submit a picture of all your completed notebook pages to me today. So starting on page 36 where it says character traits, you're going to take a picture of your highlighting all of the information that we wrote down about the difference between character traits and physical traits. And then I want not the front of this page, because you're not being asked to do anything to that. I want all of the doors open to your flip book and take a picture of your completed information. Then during read aloud time today, you're going to be finishing up your Tiger Rising packet, because this is something that you've been asked to work on yesterday during our classwork time and today. Please make sure you're finishing up. We are not having a separate read aloud today, so that gives you an extra 30 minutes to work. So yesterday you were told that I want to see a picture of a tiger colored. It can be similar to the front cover of the book that I've attached yesterday in that lesson. And then you can turn the page. You were asked to complete pages 1 through 4, and it's due today. So I expect to see you taking a picture of page 1 that we labeled, page 2, page 3, remembering the amount of sentences that were asked, and then the final page for today is page 4. So you have two tasks to do. You have your notebook to finish up, and then you have your packet to finish up that you were given 2 days to work on. Please make sure you submit all the appropriate pictures.